Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4139. Today's date is June 5, 2020. Sorry, July 5, 2026. It's been almost like a afternoon at 14:14. Okay. First of all, why am I recording Artifact in the afternoon? I usually record Artifact in the morning and in the night. Afternoon, I usually not record Artifact during the afternoon. The reason is that ki like like usually, okay, let me tell you one thing. um, there are kind of like a couple of things required to kind of like a record Artifact. Okay, what exactly things, at least from my point of perspective. Okay, so when I had a kind of like a dinner or lunch, I usually prefer to walk. Okay, now obviously that's why I record the Artifact during the night, because after I ate my dinner I could able to be walk, and during the walk I could able to be talk. Also I record Artifact in the after in the rooftop. Okay, and rooftop is a kind of like a things that I will kind of like get very much privacy. No one is kind of like here and things and that. So usually, yeah, so night is a kind of like a simply time where I record mostly Artifact. Okay, in the morning I record Artifact is because of that ki in the morning I feel like that ki I am very fresh and I am like a really like I don't know, like a, there is like higher intelligence of me, like a, basically I don't know how to I supposed to explain, but morning time is a kind of like a time where I'm very much productive. Okay, and at that time if I record Artifact, my Artifact is also became very productive. So that's why I record Artifact in the morning and after I eat my dinner during the night. So lunch is a kind of like a thing actually happen in the afternoon. Like I usually kind of like a lunch at maybe 1 p.m. or maybe 1:30 p.m. Okay, yeah. So then after that I lunch. Also I walk too. Now I live in India. Okay, weather are always been hot in here. Afternoon walking at rooftop probably not gonna possible. So that's why I skip. I usually walk in my room, or maybe I didn't really walk, or maybe I walk just kind of like a 10 minute and that's it. But right now is a kind of like a rainy season. It's not rainy season. It's a rainy season. Yeah, it's a rain. Okay, but it's not rain is actually pouring. No, it's the weather is cloudy. Okay, there are so many kind of like clouds I could see in the sky. Because of this thing, the entire sun is actually blocked. So there is a kind of like a little bit of kind of like a something diffusion, light diffusion. Okay, if you don't know the diffusion means like that na ki the light is actually spread out everywhere. That is called diffusion. So this is right now I'm kind of like experiencing as a diffusion because of the cloud weather and things and that. And another thing is that ki cold breeze probably, like this is also kind of like a really good, because of this cold breeze, like a thandi hawa, it kind of like a felt really good. Like basically it's this thing that outside weather is a kind of like a far more comfortable than inside. Okay, so it's a very kind of like a fertile situation that I just ate my lunch. I am kind of like a weather is kind of like a really good, and rooftop is kind of like always been alone, so I'm kind of like on a rooftop and kind of like walking. And then what better way to kind of like a walk with record Artifact, so that's why I started recording Artifact. All right, so I don't know, sometimes I kind of like give this kind of like a somebody the like basically like it's audio Artifact episode, so probably I don't know, I'm just kind of like telling why I'm kind of like things and that. Yeah, whatever. All right, yeah, so let's just jump into the question. All right, let's go. All right, so question is, wait, where is question? All right, yeah, should you alert authorities for danger? Oh, that's a really good question. All right, yeah, first of all, what is at least this question and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build an app called My Artifact. Okay, what is at least this application? When you write the diary every single day, you cannot able to be write the diary the way that you wanted to. The reason is that you need a like okay, you cannot able to write the diary the way that you want to do. Because of that, your thought process are actually much more faster than your writing speed. Your writing speed is actually slow is because of you need a pen, you need a paper, you need a convenience, and even after that you need to put lot of amount of effort to print your thoughts. Yeah, I'm saying print your thoughts. Okay, And because of this process is kind of like a bit more difficult to pursue or difficult to do this thing, that's why very less amount of people who are kind of like a something like a writing a diary, almost nothing really at all nowadays. No one write the diary because the effort it required to write the diary was too much. But what if instead of writing a diary, what if we could record a diary, like a audio recorded diary? The stuff that you are kind of like listening right now, this is my audio diary. I called it My Artifact. My Artifact episode number 4138. I am doing this thing for past 11 years. I am doing this thing every single day. Because of writing a diary is a self-reflection process, so as recording a diary, so as recording a artifact is a self-reflection process too. It add so much amount of value inside of me. The person that I became today, the person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of artifact. The amount of value it add inside of me, I want to share this value. How do I do that? By building an application. My application is somewhat something like a YouTube platform. A YouTube platform where you could upload your video, other people kind of like sees your video. Same thing, you record your artifact, upload your artifact in an artifact platform, other people kind of like listen your artifact. Before I wanted to build this application, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences, specifically worst possible consequences. So I went to ChatGPT, I tell my idea, tell him that he suggests me hundreds of questions regarding about all the worst possible consequences might gonna happen. ChatGPT kind of like suggests me hundreds of questions. This is one of those questions. Now regarding about this question, the question says that how will you alert authorities for danger? Okay, first of all is this thing, what is exactly is this question, and what is exactly authorities and danger and things and that and that. Now my application is a kind of like that, people will kind of like record their thoughts and things and that, right? Okay, now people are kind of like going through a lot of kind of like some struggle. Some people quite kind of like go through struggle, they were gonna talk and things and that. Some people are kind of like somebody struggle a lot that they wanted to kill themselves or they wanted to do suicide and things and that. Example, let's say a kind of like a boy name kind of like something A or B, whatever. His age is somewhat something like whatever. Okay, like I don't know, but he's a kind of like preparing an exam. Okay, yeah, he was kind of like so prepared and things. He kind of like mentioned in artifact that this exam is a kind of like a very essential, important and things and that. He is putting lot of amount of effort, pouring lot of amount of blood and soul, everything into that exam to prepare and things and that. Now what exactly happened that he didn't crack the exam. Now because of he didn't crack the exam, he kind of like mentioned that he might gonna kill himself. Now basically is this thing that exam didn't really crack. Now he wanted to kill himself. He kind of like same mentioned that this is not a kind of like a things, there is nothing really left in my life, I wanted to end my life and things and that. Now he recorded that particular artifact in this artifact platform. So should I supposed to be kind of like scared of it? Obviously, yeah, because this particular person kind of like saying this thing that I will gonna end my life. Okay, yeah. So this is a very kind of like a serious situation, and I will not gonna take this kind of like a serious situation lightly. So how do I supposed to do this thing? Okay, how do I supposed to kind of like fix the situation or things, or maybe, yeah. Well, technically is this thing, I usually kind of like simply believe in solving the problem before it even existed. Like this is kind of like a simply motto. Like basically is this thing, if you are solving the problem after the problem, then it's a kind of like a very lame to solve the problem. Why? Because of that whatever the kind of like simply the solution that you will have, you will kind of like provide after the problem actually happened, that solution is mostly temporary solution, is not a permanent solution. Okay, yeah. And it is like basically this thing that solving a problem before it even existed, it is kind of like a much more better way to solve the problem. Why? Because it doesn't really take that many resources, and the effort it really required is almost very less than solving a problem after it problem. You need a lot of resources and lot of amount of effort. Okay, So basically this thing, that's kind of like a things I usually make sure that key problem should supposed to be solved before it even existed. So that's why, because of that key, it required very less amount of resources, also less amount of effort to solve that problem before it even existed. So that is a kind of like a something that this is the kind of like a things, this is how I kind of like only solve the problem. Okay, yeah. And I knew that this will be happen in my artifact. People will gonna talk about the suicide and things and that and that and that. So in that situation, how do I supposed to do this thing? Well, I will kind of like a solve the problem before it even existed and after the problem, both. Okay, how? Let's talk about before. Okay, like basically how do I supposed to solve this problem before it even existed? Let's just say this particular person actually talking about this thing that this exam is a kind of like a very essential, important, my life will gonna end and things and whatnot. From his artifact, as also his artifact is actually kind of like a somebody judged by the Adam. Adam is a AI, by the way. Okay, Adam is an algorithm. So Adam is a kind of like a somebody, what it does, Adam try to understand him because of his previous artifact. Adam try to understand his personality, who he is, what he is, like whatever the kind of like a stuff that he says, those are the empty words or have a kind of like a gravity on it. Because there are so many people are kind of like a say, I will gonna end my life, or I will gonna things, or maybe I will gonna die, or things and that and that. These are kind of like a words are kind of like a very much common in common conversation. Okay, yeah. The only one way to kind of like understand how much it is important is understand that is this kind of like a really legit, or understand the personality. Because if that particular person is a really legit person and he already kind of like such a person who kind of like a said and did, then probably that particular person is a kind of like a somebody that a very legit person. So what exactly happened? So basically is this thing, a particular person who is a kind of like a preparing an exam, and he was kind of like a mention that this exam is how much really essential and things, and my life will gonna end and things and what and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. So Adam is a kind of like a somebody simulate the scenario in the future. Adam kind of like a like basically Adam can see the future. Sorry, Adam cannot see the future. Adam predict the future. Okay, this is kind of like I train Adam in that way that he could kind of like predict the possibility. Now how does Adam will predict the future? I already mentioned this thing. Okay, yeah, I will gonna talk later. Okay, but Adam is a kind of like a somebody figure it out that what he is like basically is this thing regarding about the past experience. Okay, yeah, regarding about this XYZ person who kind of like whatever the past experience, whatever the past artifact that he recorded, Adam tried to analyze this thing, like what makes him happy, what makes him sad, what makes him kind of like a really important, what makes him kind of like a things like try to understand that particular person. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Adam does not have that particular person information. He just have kind of like a some token number. That token number is actually generated by the okay, what is exactly the token number? Okay, so basically is this thing, as I mentioned, every person who log in through my application, they actually log in through Google. Okay, yeah, Google or whatever the kind of like a things. Right now I kind of like a set as a Google. Okay, yeah. Now my personal motto is that privacy is a kind of like a very much essential, and also is this thing, I will make sure that people who kind of like get the privacy as much as possible. Also it does not kind of like somebody that I will also not have the privacy violation. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that I have to make sure that what kind of like a data do I have, and like what kind of like a data that I'm collecting from the user. Okay, yeah. First of all, I am collecting data from artifact, the way that they kind of like a recording, audio recording. This is a data. Okay, yeah, one data. Another data is that their location, okay, and time, like when that particular person record the artifact, that time, location and artifact. These are the three data that I'm taking from the user, and I'm telling you from the beginning. Okay, yeah. Another thing, okay, I will gonna kind of like something also have their email ID, but I don't want to take their email ID, but still it is really essential for me for authentication, because I wanted that people should supposed to be login through email ID, Google email ID or whatever the kind of like things and that. Why? Because of that I will not gonna kind of like make such a platform where like if I wanted to take a kind of like some authority or kind of like any random person could able to enter in my application, then that particular person will kind of like spoil the community. That particular person might gonna kind of like somebody said something worse thing or like whatever it is. Okay, yeah. How do I supposed to be kind of like accountable? How do I supposed to kind of like give the like proper action, like a block that particular person, remove that particular person, things and that. How do I supposed to do that? The authentication, that email ID is a kind of like authentication, is kind of like a making sure that this is a legit person, and if I block this person or if I remove this person, that particular person will not kind of like do this shit stuff and things and that to kind of like maintain my community as much as better as possible. So this is kind of like a goal to kind of like take a action according to the particular person who create chaos in my community. Okay, yeah. So that's why I'm taking their email ID. But the problem is that if I'm taking their email ID, then it's a kind of like a privacy violation. Okay, yeah. So it is really essential for me to have the people enter through email ID, but I will not gonna use their email ID. So what exactly happen with the email ID? So right now I don't know how do I supposed to create this system, but I will gonna create the system which is kind of like a somewhat something like that. Authenticator. Okay, so what's exactly the authenticator? Okay, so every user is actually kind of like a login. They kind of like a login through authenticator. Okay, yeah. That authenticator is a kind of like a something very privacy, like a basically is this thing. Let's just say xyz.gmail.com. So this is a kind of like a something random email ID went through authenticator. Now authenticator is a kind of like understand this is legit person and kind of like a generate a token number. Let's just say 1 2 3 4 something like that. Okay, yeah. Now from that token number, attach all the database on that token number. Means Adam will know token number. Adam does not know their email ID. Adam knows only their token number. Token number, their artifact, their kind of like some where that artifact came from, location and time. Okay, yeah. So Adam knows their token number. Okay, like this is understand. So Adam, from that token number point of perspective, Adam try to understand or predict the possible consequences, that what might gonna happen if that particular person is a kind of like talking about the exam and things and that, what might gonna he took the step. Okay, yeah. Possibly he might kind of like kill himself or whatever it is. Okay, yeah. So Adam understand that ki higher possible chances that ki Adam will kind of like this particular person might gonna kind of like end the life if he didn't crack this exam. So what does Adam will gonna do? Adam kind of like suggest such a feed or such a artifact that kind of like enhance him or kind of like give him motivation or give him kind of like things that such a artifact that kind of like somebody add value. Like example is this thing like such an artifact that kind of like say that ki a particular person who kind of like fail, but he was kind of like somebody understand himself and kind of like somebody one exam does not kind of like decide the life and things and that and he tried to do this thing. So Adam tried to recommend such an artifact to him. Okay, yeah. So that kind of like he would kind of like listen and like basically killing the life or kind of like ending the life, this thought he will kind of like remove. So basically is this thing that ki Adam will try to save the life before it even existed, before save the life before it kind of like he will kind of like take his life and things like that, like change the perspective. Okay, Adam try to change his perspective regarding about that ki what is actually essential, give him such a content or such an artifact that kind of like somebody help him to not to end his life or kind of like something that ki motivates something that or whatever it is. Okay, yeah. So Adam try to help him. Okay, yeah. This is a kind of like somebody solving the problem by kind of like somebody from internal point of perspective, from internally. Okay, yeah. Now what is actually happened that ki after Adam did all the things that and that, but still that particular person is a kind of like something that ki might gonna do something very crazy things. How do I supposed to kind of like make sure that this particular person will kind of like will not gonna end the life? Like possibly is this thing from Adam point of perspective, 90% problem I might gonna solve. 90% of the problem I might gonna solve. 10% it's a kind of like a things that ki if I think that ki like 10% is not really sure that the 10% more probably that particular person might gonna kill himself probably, but 90% are that. But did you kind of like why not you kind of like somebody that ki alert the authority? Dude, yeah, how do I supposed to alert the authority? Like, let me tell you one thing. Like, what do I supposed to say? I will gonna say this thing, sir. Like, this particular person is a kind of like a wanted to kill himself because he kind of like a mention in the artifact. Okay, yeah. Now, if I kind of like a mention to the authority, to the police, what kind of like action that they will gonna took? They will kind of like a went into that particular person home and kind of like a say convince to the parents that ki this particular person might gonna kill himself. So kind of like a somebody keep eye on them. Okay, yeah. Even if the kind of like a parents are keep eye on them, that particular person will gonna end him life because before before the kind of like authority will doesn't know that thing, he just wanted to end his life. But right now when other people are kind of like know that this particular person might gonna end his life, so this particular person will kind of like encourage more to end his life. Why? Because of that key, when people got the attention, then kind of like somebody for that attention point of perspective, we just do things like that. So this is what it is. Okay, yeah. So do you understand? So it doesn't really make sense at all. Okay, yeah. So 90% of the problem might gonna solve through Adam by kind of like somebody showing such a things or that and that and that. I will refine the kind of like a process much more better way so that kind of like a something that ki YouTube and kind of like other social media or kind of like whatever the digital kind of like the time that he spend making sure that ki divert his thought process to kind of like a showing such a thing that ki life is much more beautiful and things and that and that. This is the kind of like a much more better way to solve the problem. 90% problem I might gonna solve, 10% I'm not really sure. Probably this particular person might gonna die, I don't know. So this is a kind of like a somebody the protocol I have regarding about the if the particular person wanted to do suicide. Okay, by the way, let me tell you one thing. I am kind of like a somebody I kind of like mention the architecture. I don't know how do I supposed to work. Like they like basically stuff that I'm kind of like a said is kind of like a far more easier that when I will implement, because implementation and kind of like a somebody execution is kind of like a much more difficult, much more like there is a lot of planning, lot of kind of like a things, lot of things are actually involved and things and that privacy breakthroughs and lot of stuff. Okay, yeah. So this kind of like a thing. By the way, okay, you are kind of like a thinking that how does Adam will know that this particular person is this particular person, because Adam only know the token number. Well, basically this thing, yes, Adam knows only token number, but kind of like a Adam kind of like a give the alert that key this is token number particular person who is a kind of like a wanted to kind of like end his life and things and that he's kind of like a highlighted. Now basically I don't know who is that particular person because I'm seeing the token number. So authenticator actually convert that token number into the email ID. So I have their email ID plus I have their kind of like a location where it kind of like artifact came from. I know that there is a time. Okay, yeah. And because of that time, I keep an eye on this thing and kind of like a recommend such an artifact that kind of like a simply matter to him or things and that and that and that. Okay, yeah. By the way, I will gonna access their email ID only and only when it essential or all right. Sorry about the disturbance. Like my father called me. Okay, whatever. So what was I kind of like saying? How does kind of like Adam will access the authenticator? So as I mentioned, the Adam will access the email ID through authenticator when the serious situation came. Okay, yeah, like basically the suicide or things and that only that period of time it kind of like went through authenticator finding that particular person and kind of like a something that key. Yeah, but another question arises that key, dude, you are kind of like a mention that privacy is a kind of like a somewhat something principle of your application. All right, then the privacy will violate, huh? Well, yeah, but if the question is about the life, then privacy doesn't really care at all. Like, what do I supposed to do with the privacy if that particular person dead? Right? It doesn't really make sense at all. Sometime I have to be block or sorry, sometime I have to be kind of like a bypass the privacy and kind of like a something that key. Like what is actually the artifact, the purpose? Kind of like a making sure the community as much as better it possible. make the people little bit better, not too much, just little bit better. Let them kind of like a talk, let them share, let them feel, let them express, let them kind of like a things. But when the things really out of the hand, I have to be bypass the privacy. Also is this thing that na ki it doesn't mean that ki I have entire information regarding about user, or Adam will have entire information about the user. No, definitely not. Okay, yeah. Adam will kind of like access the personal information only and only when it needed, when the life and threat situation in that time. Yeah. Now this is I mentioned regarding about the suicide. What about the threat? What do you mean by threat? People, like as I mentioned, like people will kind of like a record so many things, and sometimes so many stuff that they shouldn't supposed to be record. Example, a particular person who record artifact regarding about that ki he might gonna kill that particular person, or he might gonna kind of like a somebody that he like a threat or things, or maybe something worse, like basically is this thing that na ki let's just say a particular person is actually fall in love with particular girl. Okay, yeah, and he's really fall in love, like a literally like a, he's kind of like a like yeah, he's on cloud nine, and he's like a like so much fall in love. Now basically he is fall in love from his point of perspective. He didn't really approach that girl, nothing really at all. Oh yeah, I'm kind of like telling the kind of like a worst possible scenario. Okay, yeah, I don't know, it will not gonna happen, but still I'm kind of like a taking check. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that he kind of like he loved that particular girl. Now he approached that particular boy to girls that ki, hey listen, I love you, like directly. Okay, yeah. And she says, dude, I don't really know you, who you are, what the fuck off. Okay, now usually this is very much common from girl point of perspective that ki, I don't really know you, and what exactly is this thing. Now the boy get mad, like really mad, and he decided that he will kind of like throw the acid on her face. What? Are those people are actually exist? Yes, those people are actually exist. Maybe it's not in US, maybe not in Europe, but yeah, these are actually in India. Those are exist too. Those are kind of like a stupid thing. But why does people are kind of like exist? Like why does kind of like a things like obviously if you like a particular person, be a friend first, then proceed to the further, right? A kind of like a step by step. Why you like that particular person? Seriously, the first sentence that would kind of like say this thing, I love you. Who would kind of like say yes? Whatever. Okay, so this particular person, like yeah, let's talk about the serious thing. This particular person is a really came from such a background where kind of like a throwing acid to someone else is bit very common. Like basically from you and me point of perspective, it is kind of like a very extreme, like what the fuck that you are doing. But let's just say a couple of people who are actually came from very different background, and from the different background have a kind of like a make sense of different sentence of normal. Okay, example is this thing that ki throwing acid on someone's face is a kind of like a not normal to us, but from other people point of perspective, throwing acid to someone's face is a kind of like a normal. Okay, yeah, or maybe something else, whatever it is. Okay, yeah, what not people kind of like a do in love, I don't know, but whatever they are kind of do. Okay, yeah, now this particular person mentioned those stuff in artifact that key, this particular girl is kind of like broke my heart and things, and that she doesn't really deserve another boy, so basically I will kind of like throw her acid into this and that kind of like whatever stuff that she supposed to do. So in that situation, Adam understand this particular token number is a kind of like actually thinking about something very wrong. Okay, yeah. So what does Adam do? Same thing, try to kind of like give them key what is exactly the beauty, what is exactly the things, what is actually fall in love means, how should you supposed to be fall in love. Adam try to recommend such a artifact that kind of like a not to let him do such a thing. Okay, not to let him do such a thing, or kind of like a tell him that ki, this is not a right way or things and that. Adam kind of like somebody show him such a kind of like a content. Okay, now basically is this thing, this is a very serious situation. Okay, and now previously I kind of like a mention that regarding about the suicide. Okay, if I kind of like a alert the authority regarding about the suicide and things and that, what might gonna kind of like a somebody authority might gonna do, right? Okay. The kind of like assembly, the consequences might gonna happen, it might gonna happen more if I alert the authority. Okay, yeah. In the suicide situation, it might approve, it might agree, I don't know. But when the threat situation, it is really essential for me to kind of like alert the authority, because like threats are not just kind of like a throwing acid. Sometimes threat is a kind of like a things that na ki killing somebody or things and that and that and that. So in that situation, how this will gonna happen? Well, as I mentioned, the authenticator and kind of like a things, Adam kind of like a highlighted that ki this particular user is a kind of like a try to do some sort of stupid things. Okay. Now regarding about that, where that like basically Adam will kind of like alert the authority, kind of like a give the email ID or things and that key. This particular people, like a there is a kind of like a mention and their email ID, they are kind of like a something like basically is this thing that key Adam try to kind of like basically try to kind of like a somebody share his profile to the authority, that key this particular person is a kind of like a somebody somewhat something is a look like a threat, because he kind of like a mentions something regarding about the artifact in the artifact. Okay, yeah. So authority will kind of like a take the action. I don't know, there is a kind of like a particular structure, but dude, again, there is a privacy laws, dude. Like basically you did mention that ki privacy is very much essential, and you did mention that ki you will not gonna share any how user information to the anybody. So why are you kind of like sharing information to the authority? Well, I have to, as I mentioned, I have to bypass the kind of like a simply privacy at some certain point when it needed, when the life and death situation. What do I supposed to take care of that privacy? What exactly it means? There is nothing really at all. But dude, like what kind of like a things, like basically is this thing that then privacy doesn't really make sure at all. Like basically is this thing that if you are kind of like a bypass the kind of like a privacy, then user might not gonna trust. Like you are the basic important thing is that the trust that come from the privacy. You are kind of like a mention this thing from the beginning. So you are breaking your privacy, right? Well, I have to. I have to. It's not really that I will kind of like keep an eye on every people and things and that or that. No, definitely not. Just like basically this thing, you are a kind of like such a particular person, might be a kind of like you will not gonna do all those stupid thing. You will not gonna do kind of like kill yourself or kind of like a things or that and that. But how you ever kind of like a believe that other people will not gonna do? This kind of like a thing. Sometimes I have to be kind of like alert the authority. It is essential. Okay, if I don't, government kind of like a push me to. I have to. Privacy, yeah, I will not gonna kind of like a like basically is this thing that na ki, one thing I already mentioned that ki authenticator is a kind of like a simply Adam does not kind of like a touch the authenticator. Like Adam will kind of like a show the token number. Yeah, like this token number is kind of like a highlighted. From the authenticator, I will kind of like know that who is that particular person and things like that. And by the way, I will have just an email ID. I will not have their entire information. Like I will have the location and time probably. From that point of perspective, I will kind of find that who is that particular person. It's not really hard to find, because when I will have email ID, then yeah, whatever. But there is a one thing that na ki when the situation came, when the life and death situation, I have to be bypass the privacy. Okay, yeah. I wanted to. No, I don't wanted to. But we are living in such a society where different kind of like a people are actually exist. People are evil and angel at the same time. You don't know what does people think. Literally, like I have been recording for almost like 11 year, and I do know that ki, how much crippled the thought process was, because I was that too. I was kind of like, I was not kind of like a thinking, but I did kind of like somebody, I don't know, dude. Like people are so crazy, dude, so crazy. When people record artifact, they will kind of like talk about something that they shouldn't supposed to. So yeah, this is it. I have to be end here. Thank you.